Falchagu Ye Olde Scots the Celtic podcast. Kimraha Huladunya, how is everyone? Alright, this week is all about Celtic women. No, it's not just about these Celtic women, but it's about the incredible Celtic women that make us Celts so great. You know, they come from our turbulent history, they come from our scandalous royalty, and of course they come from our rich, dark mythology. Now, today we are going to have stories about such Celtic women as Big Mary of the Songs. We're going to have a story about Boudicca. We're going to have a story about these cool women from Dundee, the mill workers. We're going to have stories about women endurance drivers. And then we're going to have great music from the women of Celtic music. Capra Cayley, which is Karen Matheson, Corrina Hewitt, Kathleen McInnes, Rachel Newton, and of course, Celtic women. What a great name. If you're already a subscriber to the Ye Olde Scot YouTube channel and enjoy the variety of interesting videos and podcasts that we produce weekly, then you should join us on the Ye Olde Scot Facebook group. Not only do you get all the great videos you already enjoy, but so much more. Come and connect with your Celtic community here on Ye Olde Scot Facebook group. Dundee diplomacy. In March 1875, at a mill in Dundee, Scotland, a disagreement happened between two women who worked there. A disagreement between two Scottish women?
Can't be right.
Never. As the day went on, though, the feud between the two escalated and caused a stoppage in productivity within the mill. Again, I am dismayed that two Scottish women would act in such a manner.
I know, right?
But apparently, this mill was rather progressive for the time. It had women workers, women bosses, and women supervisors who handled problems and kept the production going no matter what. So a disagreement between two workers would have been handled just as if the men were running the place. So, Dundee mill workers Elizabeth Melville and Gordonia Skinner met during their lunch break for what they called a square go, or what we would call a cat fight.
All right. Ding, ding.
And then did it in front of a large crowd of fellow workers. After 3 rounds of fisticuffs, low blows, and pulling hair, Elizabeth won by KO. Then, when Gordonia was revived, the two went back to work as if nothing had ever happened. Yeah, right. Wouldn't that be nice in today's society? Big Mary of the Songs. What a badass name. The Skye Celtic bard and Highland Land League hero, Mary Vornan Orden. Mary Vornan Orden was many things: a nurse, a midwife, a prisoner, and most notably a Gaelic poet and songstress. But in all of them, she was a badass. It was through her work as a Gaelic poet and songstress that she earned her hero status, and endearing her to the people of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. Due to her being a thick chick, she garnered the name Mary Vor na Orden, meaning Big Mary of the Songs. Mary Vor was born in Skeebost on the Isle of Skye in 1821. She was born Mary MacDonald into a crofting family. Her early life was characterized by the rural and domestic arts typical of her gender and social class. Croft work, walking wool, making clothes, etc. Women's work. In her 27th year, though, she moved to Inverness and married a shoemaker by the name of Isaac McPherson. Now, she lived happily until around the age of 50. In 1872, Mary Vore, whilst engaged in domestic work, was imprisoned for stealing clothes from her mistress. The charge was widely considered to have been trumped up and unjust, probably because even in her domestic capabilities, she was a very vocal critic of the politics of the day. Now, after her imprisonment and the death of her husband Isaac, Mary moved to Glasgow and gained a certificate in nursing and a diploma in obstetrics. However, her time and treatment whilst in prison had made a lasting impression on Mary and revealed a talent for poetry and songwriting that had previously lain dormant. Doing time will do that. Now, the Highland clearances, they lasted well into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the effect of them, and they were condemned by many poets and writers at the time. These things were invoked in prose and song to show opposition to the enormous power of landlords under Scottish law and calls for land reform relating to crofting, but especially the cruel treatment of the Scottish Highlanders for over 100 years through forced migration, genocide, subjugation, and famine. Mary Vore's poetry was contemporary with the Highland-wide struggle over crofters' land rights, and the agitation was a subject with a strong presence in her work. Mary Vore's talent for Gaelic poetry and the ability for storytelling made her socially and politically significant in Glasgow. She became a focal point amongst the exiled Highlanders in Glasgow and Greenock, and was present at a number of gatherings there, where she built her badass reputation. Now, Mary often drew sizable crowds for her political speeches, and in her songs, Mary represented the beauty of the Highlands, and in particularly the Isle of Skye, and the strength of its people's character. Being able to communicate through the medium of Gaelic song to those that had been most affected by the Highland clearance allowed her to spread her message and her views without appraisal from local authorities. Now, Mary Vore returned to Skye permanently in 1882, where Mary Vore's work became a galvanizing force in the crofters' struggle for rights. Mary vigorously opposed the treatment and disenfranchisement of Skye crofters and wrote songs directed at those she held responsible and the indifference of those unwilling to act. Now, this included criticism of the clergy on Skye. Here's just a small example. The preachers have so little care, seeing the ill treatment of my Isle folk, and so silent about it on the pulpit, as if brute beasts were listening to them. It's kind of powerful. In addition to criticisms of individuals and privileged groups, Mary Vore wrote songs that celebrated the crofters and key events in their fight for land rights. These events included the Battle of the Braes, in the year that she returned to Skye. Now, this was an incident wherein men, women, and children, armed mostly with stones, fought a force of police and soldiers sent from Glasgow to evict them. In the 19th century, women amounted to a small minority of the Gaelic poets, yet Mary Vore managed to span the social classes with her poetry and songs. While she was a significant influence on the working classes and crofters, she also held the acclaim of academics and scholars with whom she also formed strong, friendly relationships. Mary Vore's hero status has not waned with the passing of time. In 2007, she was amongst the names of a number of women commemorated for their political impact at Holyrood. Community groups in recent years have collected stories that still survive in family traditions. These stories include how Skye communities grew excited by her frequent visits, and how when in Glasgow she would deal with hecklers with a robust sense of humor. Finally, in 2013, the Island Book Trust published a historical novel of Mary Vore's life. Love and Music Will Endure is what it's called, demonstrating that there is still no sign of a demise of her hero status in the near future. Lizzie B. Murison. Think back to when you were first learning to drive your car. Maybe you had a relative or a friend teach you, or maybe you had lessons with an instructor. Now imagine after your first few experiences behind the wheel, embarking on a 900-plus mile endurance trip from one end of Great Britain to the other, in a brand new car with 4 passengers on board. Now in September 1903, this is the challenge that 19-year-old Lizzie Murison faced. She was the first woman to drive a motor car from Land's End to John O'Groats, and she did it after a few short lessons. The last one on the night before she set off. And remember, the automobile was a new thing to the world at this point in time. Not everybody was familiar with them. Lizzie Burrows Murison was born on the 5th of January 1884 at Trumland in Orkney. Lizzie was apparently part of a very musical family. She was a noted violinist and, perhaps unsurprisingly, for the daughter of a gameskeeper, excellent on a horse and a crack shot with a rifle. In September 1903, the Automobile Club held their third annual reliability trial at Crystal Palace, a week-long event where car manufacturers pitted their latest models against each other in various challenges to demonstrate their reliability and their durability. Events included long-distance tours, laps on a dust-covered track, to see how comfortable the driver is in various conditions and how well their automobiles, of course, perform. The Paisley-based Errol Johnston Company set two of their cars to take part in the trials, but their entry to the competition was revoked after they arrived 3 minutes late. All entrants had to arrive at the palace gates by 12 noon, no exceptions. Denied the chance to demonstrate the durability and craftsmanship of their vehicle, George Johnston of the Errol Johnston Company was at a loss. Now, this is where Lizzie B. Murison, a family friend of the Johnstons, who had traveled down with the cars from Paisley, she volunteered. She stepped up to drive the Errol Johnston 12-horsepower dog cart back to Paisley from London. She knew that having a woman drive their car for such a long distance would be excellent publicity for the car maker, perhaps even more than they would have garnered at Crystal Palace. Now, in September 1903, there were very few women motorists. Whenever a woman got behind the wheel, it was sure to make the papers. Earlier that year, Britain's first female racing driver, Dorothy Levitt, had shocked Edwardian society by winning her class at speed trials in Southport. So there was a lot of publicity to be gained from Lizzie's drive. However, a more daring plan was soon hatched, and it was decided that Lizzie, who was eager for the challenge, would drive from Land's End to John O'Groats instead, a trip of 900 miles, basically from one end of Great Britain to the other end of Great Britain in the north. The dog cart was brought to Penzance, and on the night of the 20th September, Lizzie had her last lesson on how to operate the car. She would be heading to John O'Groats. At 4 p.m. on Tuesday, 21st September, Lizzie, 4 passengers, basically a lady and 3 gentlemen, and all their luggage left from Land's End amidst cheers from fellow motorists who had turned out to support her. We know that she reached Penzance within 45 minutes and was expected to reach Exeter that evening. Unfortunately, that's about all we know about how her journey progressed. She had expected to arrive at John O'Groats on the Saturday, but ended up arriving on Monday afternoon, 6 days after she set off. Now, she drove, single-handedly, 900 miles on roads that were not built for automobiles. She averaged 180 miles each day over 57.5 hours of driving. Now, her average speed was 15.5 miles per hour, and on her longest day of driving covered 213 miles. In an interview she gave to a journalist from the Northern Ensign and Weekly Gazette, she described the roads in Cornwall and in the Highlands as being particularly trying and too much for the journey. The roads were cloaked in rain and heavy mists. Asked if the journey went well, she replied, "Yes. I had the good fortune to steer quite clear of all accidents of either man or beasts, although several of my party expected, I believe, to end their journey in glory." After arriving at John O'Groats, she and her friends stayed overnight at the Randall Station Hotel in Wick before setting off for Inverness the next morning. She thus completed more than 1,000 miles of driving in 1 week. Asked about her accomplishment, Lizzie said that she had no desire for fame as a record breaker and was said to be very humble about the achievement. So why isn't the story of her groundbreaking journey better known? Well, Errol Johnston apparently didn't advertise. They didn't advertise it on the strength of her achievement. Now, newspapers up and down the country reported on her success, and the picture of Lizzie at the wheel of the dog cart at John O'Groats appears in many books in early British motoring, but no modern researchers have gone any further to learn about Lizzie and her story. All are happy to reprint the photo with Miss Murison in the caption. While there were very few women in motoring before 1903, there was a lot going on now. This may have created the atmosphere that might have made Lizzie's accomplishment less exciting. The Ladies' Automotive Club was newly founded, and members of the club were from the upper classes and promoted motoring for ladies to elevate oneself in the ranks of society. The young, single daughter of a gameskeeper from Orkney wouldn't have been welcomed in their club. And while Lizzie was driving away from the reliability trials at Crystal Palace, Dorothy Levitt, who was a part of upper class society, was there stealing the show. Levitt was the only female driver at Crystal Palace, and almost every report made from the event including something of her story there. From 1903, Dorothy Levitt was the woman in motoring, breaking record after record in speed and distance, and her stories had additional intriguing details like her co-pilot Pomeranian dog and the revolver she kept in her toolkit. Though Levitt and Murison challenged Edwardian sensibilities on how single working women should behave, Dorothy was a high-speed sprinter to Lizzie's slow and steady marathoner. And some believe that the whole 3 minutes late thing was a ruse so that the Ladies' Automobile Club could have Dorothy Levitt be the only woman there at the trials so that they could hold her up, since she was part of upper class, as being one of them. In 1905, the 900-mile journey of Miss Murison had all but gone from Britain's collective memory. Dorothy Levitt's journey from Liverpool to London was lauded as record-breaking, being a publicity stunt for De Gionne Motors. But her 206-mile trip to London, even though it's remembered today, was just a part of Lizzie Murison's trip, 213 miles. Now, Lizzie Murison returned to Ireland. She married a sea captain, went off into obscurity, died at age 70 on the 2nd of February 1954, and is buried in Burnchurch graveyard with her parents and siblings in Kilkenny, Ireland. Now, as sad as it seems, but because of women like Lizzie Murison, many more women went on to great accomplishments behind the wheel.
O heit mi harish guinish numbo Vaden kyo for hanet ido vaho Sna heriri ohi hoiden no ku ohi lo vaho Guinish numbo Vaden kyo for hanet Vaden bifiak sen langan ilio vaho Sna heriri ohi hoiden no ku ohi lo vaho Gubra ilohiel Vaden bifiak sen langan Esra pagnan stuk Halo voyanga ilio Sna heriri braidd o hil, far'n bifiag san mangan I lova ho. Sna hyrir I ahi, oedden no gu ahi lova ho. I lova ho. Sna hyrir I ahi, oedden no gu ahi lova ho.
Queen Boudicca. As most British school children know, Queen Boudicca was the badass warrior queen of the Iceni tribe, now whose rebellion against the Romans was eventually squashed, but Boudicca and her people had lived among the Romans for years. However, she raised a rebellion. Now her rebellion united the Iceni with a handful of neighboring tribes who were usually inclined to be at war with each other. She was seeking revenge after a series of brutal attacks by the Romans. A-holes to the world. The final straw had been the public humiliation and scourging of the proud queen. Recently widowed and thus deprived of her protector husband, King Prasutagus. The Romans assumed the Iceni were weakened by her husband's death, so they moved to take advantage of the situation. The Romans, being unable to affect Boudicca, to play along, resorted to other tactics. Boudicca's daughters, whose ages were unrecorded, were raped by the Roman soldiers. Then they were enslaved along with other members of the family, and this was the immediate cause of Boudicca's rebellion in AD 61, the proverbial straw that broke the angry Celtic badass woman's back. Now Boudicca spent the next few months raiding supply wagons, ambushing sentries, and pilfering weapons from Roman storehouses. Now the Romans thought this was the work of a desperate criminal, but in reality it was a leader preparing for war. Boudicca had several successful battles against smaller Roman contingencies, but she knew a large, all-for-nothing battle lied in her immediate future. Now, after a series of surprise victories for the Britons, the conflict came to a head probably somewhere between Verulamium, which is St. Albans, and Londinium, which is London, at the Battle of Watling Street. Now, the crack Roman general Suetonius Platonius had decided to take a break from burning Druids in Wales to put an end to the insurrection in the south. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, in the hours before the decisive battle, Boudicca rode a war chariot up and down her ranks, whipping up her army and willing her band of warriors to victory. Yet for all her vitriolic anger and indignation, she and her followers were eventually and inevitably routed by the most powerful empire Europe had ever known, David Hasselhoff. No, it was the Romans. Now Boudicca, unwilling to be the Romans' plaything, poisoned herself so as to avoid slavery, or worse. Boudicca and the attempted colonization of Britain was largely lost until the Renaissance, when Tacitus' histories were rediscovered and republished in new editions across Europe. The rediscovery of Tacitus, whose works began to trickle into Britain during the reign of the Tudor monarchs, caused a stir in the still fractious nations of Britain. Heroic myths, including the fantastic tales of wizards and courtly knights popularized by Geoffrey of Monmouth, were swept aside. In their place stood a woman, described in William Cowper's 1782 poem, Boudicca, an Ode, as bleeding from the Roman rods, with vengeance in her eyes and a spear in her hand. She was one of the earliest named Britons in documented history, and for one Tudor woman in particular, she represented an opportunity. Elizabeth I's speech to her troops at Tilbury before the invasion of the Spanish Armada is suggested to have taken something from Boudicca's oracle display, as a way to rouse the troops in badass Boudicca fashion. Now Boudicca and her daughters had been violated and fought back as best they could, even if they were doomed to fail. Now, how could these three women stand against such a powerful foe? Well, Elizabeth would surely had made the analogy that Britain was the Boudicca in this situation and the Spanish were Rome. Her contempt for death, refusal to be enslaved, and willingness to avenge those who wronged her and her family earned her the badass reputation which formed the basis of barbarian virtue. Now, which might fly in the face of Christian value, but lies in the heart of every British woman. Boudicca illustrates the dangers of paganism while displaying native pluck and patriotic fervor. Boudicca has had a storied posthumous life, as her various appropriations show. As with any aspect of culture, history can be both political and personal. It is her badass story, though, that is important.
Top 11 Heritage. Now remember to check out my YouTube channel. It's got Celtic music, podcasts, Gaelic language, Gaelic song, Celtic history videos, plus lots more. And my Facebook group where you can give me your inputs and insights on all things Celtic.
Goodbye, Apple Baby. Masha Weave.
Goodbye, everybody. But I'm going to let you go with a song.
What day am I, my son? What day am I, my true love? When will the truth be won? When will the truth be